Around to politics in Africa now. In Rwanda, the number of terms a sitting president should be allowed to stay is up for discussion. Rwandan lawmakers have been discussing removing the limits on the number of terms a leader can serve. President Paul Kagame is against it, but he's quite willing to go with it only if the people want him to. His position, no matter how diplomatic, has come under heavy criticism by people who say the president is guilty of trampling on media and political freedoms. However, in the international community, President Kagame has been praised for the country's progress since the genocide in 1994 and is well on its way to complete economic reform, that's Rwanda itself, by the year 2020. Just before we go on, let's take a look at 5 of Africa's longest-serving leaders. Coming right up top on the list is Paul Biya of Cameroon. The 82-year-old has been in power since 1975, first as prime minister, and then he consolidated power in 1983. Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo has been president of Equatorial Guinea since 1979. The state media calls him a national god, and he is 73 years old. Up next is Jose Eduardo dos Santos of Angola. He's been in power since 1979, reportedly the wealthiest president on the continent. His daughter, Isabel dos Santos, is the richest woman in Africa and the continent's first female billionaire. President Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe comes in fourth. Analysts say that the 91-year-old is Africa's most, quote, notorious dictator. He first became prime minister in 1980, then president in 1987. Finally making the list is President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. He's been in power since 1986. He helped to topple former leader Idi Amin in 1979. His tenure has brought relative stability and economic growth, but his presidency has been marred by involvement in the civil war in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So Africa's leadership has come under scrutiny every now and then. Today is one of those days when we discuss politics in Africa. I have on the line Mr. Wahab Shu. He would have been with us in the studios, but he's feeling a bit under the weather. Nevertheless, he's joined us via telephone in Lagos. Mr. Shutu, thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you, Amara, for inviting me.
So what you make? You're welcome. What do you make of these leaders spending longer and longer terms in office? Each of these people I have mentioned have been in power for more than 10 years.
Well, I think it depends. Yeah, I'm actually.
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
It depends on the circumstances and the will of the people. There are several perspectives to this controversy. The first issue to consider is the will of the people, technically referred to as the sovereignty of the people, which is the hallmark of democracy. If a leader is called upon to serve by his people, it will be a disservice to turn such a request down. Closely tied to this is sacrifice in the national interest. I think by this sacrifice, I want to quickly refer to the immortal quotes of Abraham Lincoln, who told his press secretary on the eve of his death. He said, the worthiness of life is deputed in sacrifice to mankind. If one dies in the process, he becomes a martyr. So sacrifice, if a leader is called upon to make sacrifice for his country, he cannot be seen to turn such a request down. Closely also tied to this is the element of patriotism, which is also a key factor here, the love of the country. If a leader is called upon in the spirit of patriotism to serve his country, no matter the length of the period, the leader cannot be seen to turn it down. But above all, what is important is performance. Is the leader delivering on good governance? Has he succeeded in transforming the lives of the people during his tenure? That is key here. Because no matter the system of government that is in operation, what the people want to see at the end of the day is democracy dividends and the delivery of what we call good governance.
Mr.
So
Shittu,
yeah, okay.
Mr. Shittu, thank you for clearing that up for us. You did mention patriotism. You spoke about a love for a country, and sometimes these leaders have had to deliver their own countries. I'm looking at their profiles here, and each of these people have been, some of them, well, all of them, I would say, have delivered their countries at one point or the other from either dictators or from the hands of former colonial masters. But what really went wrong? Because they haven't given up power since then.
Well, if they have not given up power, the question to ask, hello?
I can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go on.
To consider is, if they have been in power for such length of time, why have they not been able to put in place a succession plan? Because a visionary leader ought to be able to produce a worthy successor. Because what is the essence of your vision if you don't have a worthy successor? So staying put for such a long time is also what one can refer to as an indictment on them, because within that length of period, they ought to have been able to produce that people who are credible in terms of competence, in terms of character, in terms of capacity to take over from them. But everything, I must say, depends on the will of the people, because democracy itself is founded on the sovereign will of the people, and that's the driving process. So if the people want them to continue, provided the electioneering process is free, fair, transparent, and credible, then there's no way one can query it, because a people's destiny lies in their own hands. So it is really very difficult to be able to pass a judgment, except one has all the facts on the table. If the leader is trying to impose himself on the people without their consent, then what will emerge from that process is illegitimacy. And then the people are entitled to revolt and insist that the leader ought to quit, because he's no longer commanding, the interest of the people. The leader no longer, commands the confidence of the people to continue in office. So at all points in time, what is critical is the will of the people as expressed through the ballot box.
But can the will of the people continue for more than 10, 15 years? Because elections still go on in these countries, and these people always turn out the winner because there is no strong opposition against them.
Now, the question you want to ask is that such elections, are they free, fair, credible, transparent, and peaceful? Those are the ingredients to look at. If the people are so docile not to be able to recognize the fact to change their leadership, then the leader has not even succeeded. Because if a leader is to be adjudged as being successful, then he must have put in place a mechanism that will ensure orderly succession by people of competence, character, and capacity, which is something that is critical. So if a leader for such a length of period has not been able to produce people who could take over from him, then such a leader can be said to be a failure. Because you cannot say that it is only you alone who can deliver democracy dividends. So I would say it is an indictment of the people themselves for not being able to take their destiny in their own hands. And so rather than condemn the leader, you also have to bring your searchlight on the attitudinal chemistry of the followership. If the followership is enlightened, proactive, and educated enough, they should know that they should be able to put in place a mechanism that will ensure that no leader stays in office more than necessary. But everything depends on the perspective and the circumstances.
It makes me want to ask at this point if democracy really is the system of governance for Africa.
You see, democracy has to be, democracy the way it is practiced, and the way all of us know it, is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. But you want to examine the way our own democracy is practiced in Africa. What you can see happening is that democracy has now suddenly been turned into a government of the politicians, by the politicians, for the politicians. Because most oftentimes, our democracy is a product of elite conspiracy. And then you have such other factors, such unnecessary factors playing dominance, like cash and carry democracy. And the environment is heavily monetized. And again, you find the kind of dirty politics and politics that is going on. For instance, you look at the last election in Nigeria, the kind of hate campaigns that was generated across all the political lines, people trying to run down reputations because of the quest for political office. So because of so we can say that our democracy is evolving. And I think what we can recommend about what has really happened in Nigeria today is the way our president, our incumbent president, has come out to openly, congratulate the winner of this last election, even before the results are announced. That is something that has recommended Nigeria to the rest of the world in terms of statesmanship. And you can also see the president-elect, extending his hand of fellowship to the incumbent president. It shows that our democracy is growing. Because democracy is a process. It's a journey. We can say that we have not arrived at the destination, maybe because of the level of our political education. But instead of all these impediments, we should not lose hopes. Men of goodwill, men and women of goodwill should be encouraged to come into the political space. For the first time in our country, for instance, we have highly qualitative people coming on board. And more people should be encouraged to play politics according to the rules. We should avoid muslinging. We should avoid monetizing the process. And we should encourage people of goodwill, people of merit, to come and render service. Because democracy can only be meaningful if it translates into service delivery quality, if it translates into performance, if it translates into respect for the rule of law, if it translates into respect for constitutionalism, if it translates into respect for rights protection, if it translates into zero tolerance for corruption, if it translates into good governance. If democracy leads to good governance, then it is something that is desirable for Africa. But if democracy translates into dictatorship, oppression of the rights of others, then we will say that we have not arrived at that destination. But Nigeria has shown an example for the rest of Africa.
Indeed, Mr. Shitu, Nigeria has shown an example to the rest of Africa, because that is a really rare move by President Goodluck Jonathan, conceding defeats, congratulating the opposition for winning the election. He really needs to be commended. Once again, Nigeria sets an example for Africa. Thank you so much, Mr. Wahab Shu. We do hope you feel better in the coming days. Thank you for sparing us your time on the program.
I'm not that you're doing well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.